Most men over 40 are chasing total testosterone, and they're looking at the wrong marker. The number that actually predicts how you feel, how you train, and how you recover is free testosterone, the fraction not bound to a protein called SHBG. A 2011 clinical trial found that a cheap, overlooked trace mineral shifted this ratio dramatically in just 7 days. The mineral is boron, and while it doesn't stimulate new testosterone production, it unlocks what your body is already making. Here's the mechanism, the data, and the protocol. Here's what most blood panels don't tell you. Total testosterone is close to useless as a standalone marker. Your body produces plenty of it, but most of it gets bound to SHBG, or sex hormone-binding globulin, the moment it enters your bloodstream. Once it's bound, it can't enter your cells, it can't fuel recovery, and it can't support your mood or your sleep. So your total testosterone number can sit comfortably in the mid-range, while the fraction that actually matters, your free testosterone, quietly falls. If that sounds like your last blood panel, you're not alone. This is the most common hormone blind spot I see in men at this stage. SHBG tends to rise as you age. It also climbs with chronic stress, poor sleep, and insulin resistance. The result is a slow tightening of the leash on your own hormones. You end up with a panel that looks fine on paper and a body that doesn't feel fine at all. Total testosterone sits around 500 to 600. Free testosterone falls in the bottom quartile, and the doctor says everything looks normal. That's the pattern I see most often in men at this stage of life. The mechanism here is straightforward, and it explains how boron fits into this picture. Boron doesn't tell your testes to produce more testosterone. It doesn't act like a stimulant or a precursor. What it does is disrupt the bond between SHBG and the hormones it carries. Think of SHBG as a docking station that locks testosterone in place. Boron interferes with that docking process. It uncouples testosterone from its carrier and converts it from a bound, inactive state to a free active state. The research suggests this happens through a displacement effect. Boron appears to compete for the same binding sites that SHBG uses to grab onto testosterone. Once that bond weakens, more testosterone circulates unbound. And because this is a displacement mechanism rather than a synthesis mechanism, the effect arrives quickly. Measurable changes in SHBG have been observed within 6 hours of the first dose. Boron also extends the half-life of vitamin D and reduces inflammatory markers like CRP. Those are secondary effects, but they matter for men in this demographic. Low-grade inflammation and poor vitamin D status both suppress the testosterone axis over time. So boron is working on multiple pathways. But the SHBG effect is the one that moves the needle fastest. The mechanism is only part of the story. The real question is whether this displacement effect shows up in actual human blood work. Here's what the research actually shows. In 2011, Nagy and colleagues gave 8 healthy men roughly 10 milligrams of boron every morning for 7 consecutive days. After 1 week, free testosterone had risen by 28%. SHBG had dropped measurably, estradiol had fallen by 39%, and DHT rose by 10%. And several inflammatory markers, including high-sensitivity CRP and TNF-alpha, dropped alongside them. A separate study by Milkovic and colleagues in 2004 tracked 13 middle-aged men in Serbia who were deficient in vitamin D. They received 6 milligrams of calcium fructoborate daily for 2 months. Free testosterone increased by 29.5% on average. That number is remarkably close to the Nagy finding, despite a different population, a different form of boron, and a longer timeline. Now I need to be direct about the limitations. The Nagy trial ran just 8 men for 1 week with no placebo control. That's not the kind of trial you build a drug around. And the Milkovic study focused primarily on vitamin D, with testosterone as a secondary endpoint. The most rigorous athletic trial to date was a placebo-controlled study by Green and Ferrando in 1994. They gave male bodybuilders 2.5 milligrams of boron daily for 7 weeks and found no effect on total testosterone, lean mass, or strength. Dose clearly matters. 2.5 milligrams wasn't enough to move the marker. 6 to 10 milligrams appears to be the window where the effect shows up. There's also a broader limitation. No study has tracked boron's SHBG effect beyond 7 days. Researchers don't know if the body develops compensatory mechanisms over time. They also can't say whether the effect plateaus or reverses. The evidence offers a strong, fast-acting signal from a small data set. That's useful information, but it's not a finished story. Let me show you what this looks like in practice. A 44-year-old executive came in with classic low T symptoms. Morning energy faded, his training response softened, and sleep fragmented into unrefreshing chunks. His blood work told a split story. Total testosterone was 580, squarely in the normal range. But SHBG registered at 55 nanomoles per liter, and free testosterone sat at the 15th percentile for his age. His body produced the hormone, but it just couldn't access it. He started 10 milligrams of boron citrate daily and kept everything else the same. 8 weeks later, SHBG fell to 42, and free testosterone had climbed to the 35th percentile. He reported better morning energy and a sharper training response within the first month. This is a single case, not a trial. But but it illustrates the clinical pattern. When SHBG is the bottleneck, boron can be a precise, low-cost lever. If that pattern looks familiar, here's what to do with it. Start with baseline labs. You need total testosterone, free testosterone calculated or measured directly, and SHBG. You also want estradiol on a sensitive assay, vitamin D, and CRP for context. Without these numbers, you're flying blind. The dose that produced results in the human trials was 6 to 10 milligrams of elemental boron daily. Most supplements use boron citrate or boron glycinate. Researchers used calcium fructoborate in the osteoarthritis and vitamin D trials. No study has compared forms head-to-head, so pick a reputable brand and confirm the elemental dose on the label. Timing is flexible. Boron doesn't require a fat-containing meal. You can take it with breakfast or on an empty stomach. Absorption is high either way, roughly 85 to 90%. Now, most supplement advice stops at the dose, but the dose without the right testing schedule is just guesswork. Cycling is a common recommendation in fitness communities, but the research doesn't support it as a requirement. The research hasn't shown that continuous use becomes harmful or that breaks improve outcomes. Still, the absence of long-term data makes cycling a pragmatic precaution. A reasonable approach is 8 weeks on, followed by 2 to 4 weeks off. This respects the unknowns, while still giving you a long enough run to assess the effect. Recheck your labs at 3 months. That's enough time for SHBG to shift and for free testosterone to stabilize. If your SHBG was elevated at baseline and you've responded, you'll see the change by then. If nothing moved, boron may not be the right tool for your specific hormone profile. Not every man has an SHBG problem, and throwing boron at normal SHBG is unlikely to produce much. Men who benefit most are those with mid-range total testosterone and elevated SHBG. Men on testosterone replacement therapy should be cautious. The interaction between boron and exogenous testosterone has not been studied. And if your SHBG is already low, there isn't much binding protein to disrupt, so the upside is limited. Before you start, you need to understand the safety picture. At doses of 1 to 6 milligrams daily, boron is generally well tolerated. Common side effects have not been documented in that range. At 6 to 10 milligrams, the studied range for hormonal effects, the trial data doesn't show frequent adverse events. That doesn't mean side effects are impossible. It means they haven't been documented clearly in the small studies we have. The most relevant concern at standard supplement doses is a measurable increase in estrogen in some individuals. Boron can elevate estradiol, particularly in women, and the effect in men is less consistent, but still possible. If you're on an aromatase inhibitor or managing an estrogen-sensitive condition, this matters. If you're on testosterone replacement therapy, be careful. That combination hasn't been studied, and the interaction remains theoretical. High doses are a different story. Extended use of 25 milligrams or more has been linked to dermatitis, hair loss, loss of appetite, and indigestion. The tolerable upper intake level in the United States is 20 milligrams per day. The European Food Safety Authority sets a more conservative limit at 10 milligrams. Staying inside the 6 to 10 milligram research window keeps you well below both thresholds. Your kidneys excrete most of the boron you take in. If you have impaired renal function, use caution. Any supplement that shifts hormone markers demands the same discipline. Track before you start, track while you're on it, and track again after a break. Free testosterone is the number that actually matters. Boron is one of the few evidence-based levers that directly affects it, and it does so within days, not months. If this changed how you're thinking about your next blood panel, subscribe. This is what we cover every week.